My name's Jack. Welcome to this talk this evening on animal hibernation with Ritika. Hopefully you can see Ritika in the corner there. Just before we begin, I'm going to quickly talk through the sort of the schedule for the day. We're going to have the talk, and then at the end of the talk, any questions that people have, we'll put them in the chat function. So hopefully you can all access the chat. If you have any questions, we'll go through them at the end. And with that, over to you, Ritika.
Hello, everyone. A very good sunny afternoon to you, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Ritika, a neuroscience PhD student at Oxford, and I'm here to talk a little bit about the fascinating ways in which different animals rest, how they sleep, how they hibernate. So please sit back, relax, and I hope you enjoy while we go through this together. Yeah, as Jack said, if you have any questions, pop them in the chat box, and at the very end, I'll try to answer them. Um, let's see. So, to begin with, a little bit about me. I grew up in India, where I went to school and I studied physics, chemistry, and biology in high school. That was about when I learned how sleep was important to me because I dropped math, the subject that gave me sleepless nights. um, Something doesn't look right. Okay, no, that looks more like me. So, after that, I went to college. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I just knew that I liked animals. And so I did an undergrad degree in zoology, studied a little bit of chemistry on the side. Most of my undergrad years were spent during the COVID-19 pandemic. So, whatever internships I did or whatever exploring I did was online. And I started working with a group in California where we studied how seals slept in the open ocean. And this actually sealed my interest in studying sleep. And I got a chance to fly in here to understand the neuroscience and physiology of how animals rest, recover, and rejuvenate. And then did my master's in neuroscience. Again, I worked with different kinds of animals, with ferrets, with mice, with hamsters, and then I stayed to do a DPhil, otherwise known as a PhD, in neuroscience, looking at sleep and hibernation in these really cute hamsters called Siberian dwarf hamsters or Jungarian hamsters. So I'll try to walk you through all the cool things I learned in this journey and why I study what I study right now, hoping that you find it interesting. Now, broadly speaking, sleep has a few different stages. There is rapid eye movement sleep or REM sleep and non rapid eye movement sleep or non REM sleep. Now, these are primarily distinguished by looking at waves of brain activity called electroencephalography, or briefly put, EEG. Now, you might have seen it in a hospital somewhere where they just stick these circular patches on your head with some sort of a glue that comes up easily, and then you can see those squiggly lines on a monitor. That's your EEG. Now, EEG waves in non rapid eye movement sleep or non REM sleep are tall and fat, like you can see here. They tell us that the different cells or neurons in the brain are experiencing periods of silence and this happens in waves. So they turn on and they turn off. But if you look at the EEG waves in REM or rapid eye movement sleep, which is also where most people experience a lot of dreams, it's very similar to the awake EEG. And this could be a way to explain how vivid and lifelike dreams sometimes seem. So there's a lot of activity inside the brain and the body while animals sleep. Among other things, it helps us learn. It's essential for memory, for immune functioning, and is linked with lots of repair processes. Now, while asleep, animals are less active, they are inactive, they are less alert, they are therefore vulnerable to predation. And in the wild, where you either hunt or you get hunted, this is definitely not ideal for survival. And yet, sleep is so universal and so essential. Why? Now, all the animals studied so far have some semblance to this kind of staged sleep. From the simplest hydra to planaria to reptiles, jellyfish, zebrafish, and even the largest of mammals, that is, whales, every animal sleeps in its own unique kind of way. Sleep is a very fundamental state of being, just like breathing, just like eating and reproducing. But how long and in what way different species sleep also shows great variation. And this variation, there's so much diversity that it actually makes us question what is the function of sleep. Is sleeping the default state and being awake something that animals evolved? There are so many questions that come up when you actually look at how the world rests. Now, let me show you a few examples that might help you appreciate the diverse functions that sleep serves by looking at some cool ways in which common and not so common animals sleep. So, this is our very own channel for this inside talk that I have tried to call Snooze News. So, starting with the humble household dog. Now, if you look closely at its eyes, you can, so these are, I'm going to show you a series of videos from YouTube that I can share the links for so that you can watch it again later. But this is a dog that's in rapid eye movement sleep. You can see the eyeballs, if you look closely, moving from one side to another in a saccadic motion that is called rapid eye movements. And maybe the dog is dreaming of running after its favorite cat, pawing at it, who knows. But the thing that allows you to sleep with your dog when he or she is dreaming and that saves you and gives both of you a peaceful night of sleep is that they do not act their dreams out. In fact, it's also what keeps you from acting your dreams out. Your muscles are actually paralyzed in rapid eye movement sleep. So that is a real fact. And so, yet, why do we experience these vivid memories? Why do we see what we see in dreams? Some suggest, some scientists think that it's a way in which you remember things better that you experience while you're waking up. You, in different combinations, you experience those memories again and again. And because your muscles are paralyzed, you only see it in your mind, in your brain, but not act it out. Here's another cool example of REM sleep or rapid eye movement sleep. This is an octopus. So scientists suggest there was a very recent study in Japan where they looked at these lots of different octopi and they saw that even in these seemingly simple organisms where the brain is decentralized, which means that there is no one brain in a brain box like ours, rather there are many small brains in different arms of the octopus with one central sort of central brain in this region. Even in these animals, there are different stages of sleep. And what is interesting is that in different stages of sleep, there is a different skin coloration. So, this is a dreaming octopus, and probably based on what it's thinking about, a crab perhaps that makes it go red, or the sand that makes it go white. Who knows? But it's so different and so unique to this animal. Now, looking at a more exotic species, this is the reef-dwelling parrotfish. Now, these fascinating fish they basically secrete a mucus bubble from their mouths that surrounds their bodies, and it not only protects them from parasites, so they are susceptible to a lot of parasitic infections in their eyes, for example. So during the day, there are some other symbiotic organisms or mutualistic organisms that come and help clean the eyes or bodies of these fish, like these shrimps and these fish. But during the night when this parrotfish is unable to have that relationship anymore, it protects itself by exuding that mucus bubble around itself. And this also helps in vigilance, because if there is an eel or some sort of a predator around and the bubble gets disturbed, the animal or the parrotfish can wake up. While we are still in the water, let's talk a little bit about this semi-aquatic mammal, the hippopotamus. Now, because it's semi-aquatic, it can sleep on land, and when it sleeps on land, it's probably sleeping like a human. But inside the water, it doesn't have gills, so it cannot breathe inside water. It still has to surface, or its nose has to come outside water to take air in so that its lungs can work. So while in water, they have a very interesting reflex. A reflex is any action that you can do without consciously thinking about it. And this reflex, while the animals are in non rapid eye movement sleep, allows them to bob their head up to the surface of the water, take a breath, and come back down without waking up at all. It will come, you'll see it in a few seconds. It's a little further ahead in the video. But what's interesting is that they can do this only when they are in non REM sleep. In REM sleep, when their muscles don't work anymore or they are paralyzed, they cannot do this. So they remain submerged in water in REM sleep, and then they have to wake up, come to the surface, breathe, and then go back to sleep again underwater. Um, and what's interesting when I say that the muscles are paralyzed in REM sleep is that it's not all muscles that are paralyzed in REM sleep, because how would your diaphragm work, for example, if it were paralyzed? You would not be able to breathe at all. So it's very selective groups of muscles that still keep working and allow you to live while you're in REM sleep. So there we go. That was the bob up to breathe reflex in non REM sleep in the hippo. Now, moving on. Now, very closely related actually to hippos are seals. They are also aquatic mammals, but they have some really different and extraordinary sleeping abilities. When in the water, they need to surface to breathe as well so that they don't inhale water. But unlike hippos, they don't have that bob up to breathe reflex, or they do not have those floating abilities that hippos have. Their bodies are built different. So they have to keep moving their flippers to stay afloat, to keep swimming, to come to the surface of the water. How would this animal do that? On the land, it sleeps normally, like a hippo would, like a human would probably. But in the water, they cannot do this. So they actually have evolved what is known as unihemispheric sleep, where they sleep with one half of the brain while the other half remains awake. So, for example, in this seal is able to keep swimming with half its body inside. The left flipper is inside the water and it keeps moving. The left eye is also inside the water and it stays open so that if there is a shark or some sort of an orca whale that can eat this seal around, it sees it and wakes up and swims away. The nostrils remain outside water, and all of this is required to maintain this posture so that it can sleep with half a brain and yet stay aware of predators around and keep swimming. Now, if the left side of the animal is active, it is always the opposite side of the brain that is awake. So it's the right side of the brain that is awake, and all the opposite things. So anything on the opposite axis. So the left side of the brain and the right side of the body are asleep or inactive. So here is an example of what that might look like. This is not the best example to begin with. This is probably a seal that is slowly going into this state. But you can see that the eye that's outside the water is closed. The flipper that's inside the water is moving much more than the one that's outside. And this is probably what it will maintain as it goes along and goes deeper into non-REM sleep. What's interesting now is if it has to continue moving in order to stay afloat, in order to breathe, and in order to be vigilant, then it cannot possibly go into rapid eye movement sleep where it is not allowed to have muscle tone, where its muscles are paralyzed. And that's what happens in these animals. In aquatic mammals like these northern fur seals, like whales, like dolphins, there is no rapid eye movement sleep at all. And that again calls to question the relevance of having different stages of sleep. Now, if we move ahead and look more closely, this is basically an illustration that's explaining how unihemispheric sleep works in a more easy way. But what's interesting is that it's not just limited to cetaceans or aquatic mammals, it's also seen in reptiles and some birds. Now, for reptiles, why would they need this? They need this to maintain the body and brain temperature in aquatic environments. But in birds, they need it for one, long migratory flights. So some birds, like great frigate birds, I don't have a picture of it here, but they're really cool. They're black and red and white and have really large wingspans, and they make very long migratory flights. And they have to do it in a very limited span of time. And in order to be successful, they also have to find a way to sleep on the wings. So they sleep while flying, and they sleep with half their brains while the other is awake, and they keep alternating. Sometimes makes you wonder, can humans do that? Well, we haven't discovered it in humans like we've discovered it in these animals, but sometimes, like in cases of major depressive disorder, some asymmetries in how the two sides of the brain look in their activity do emerge. And so maybe similar patterns exist. Also, it's been seen that if you first spend a night in a new place, you seem to be a little bit more alert and a little bit more active. You don't sleep that deep. So that's known as the first night effect. And even in those cases, some asymmetry in right and left hemisphere activity is sometimes seen. So maybe we also had the capacity to sleep unihemispherically at some point in our evolutionary history. But right now, it appears that we don't. Um, Now, looking at another very closely related species to the kind of seals we saw, this is a different sort of seal. It's called the northern elephant seal. It is in a category of seal called faucet seals. Despite having the same environmental pressures of having predators, of having the requirement to come to the surface to breathe while sleeping, these animals cannot sleep unihemispherically at all. They sleep like humans, they sleep with both the hemispheres at the same time. Instead, to cope with the same pressures, they have evolved their own super abilities because they can hold their breaths and go into what's known as an apnea for a really long duration while they're sleeping. So they stay submerged in the water in both non-REM and REM sleep, but when they are in REM sleep, they completely hold their breath for 20 to sometimes 77 minutes. And this is thanks to their superior physiology that allows their blood to carry more oxygen. That is also, it's also because of the different kind of alveoli or divisions in their lungs and categories or different compartments in their lungs that allow them to collapse. So the compartments, when they are in at depth, when they're holding their breath, they collapse. And once they resurface, they can reopen. But in humans, that can't happen. So they are really special animals. And here is an animated video that was based on real recordings of animal movement and brain activity in wild elephant seals in the open ocean. So the seal just entered slow wave sleep, which is another name for non-rapid eye movement sleep. But you see, as soon as it entered REM sleep, it started going in a spiral. It looks like a drifting, falling leaf. And that is very unique and very, particular to this species. So that's what happens. They catch some sort of a drift which allows them to um, go in circles and they don't breathe at that time. And this is thanks to techniques called telemetry and electrophysiology. So I'm going to take this example to tell you a little bit about how these studies are done. Now, while electrophysiology refers to recording body activity like electrical waves in the brain, muscles, and the heart, telemetry refers to the process by which these body recordings, along with some other recordings of the position of the seal in water, all of this information can be transmitted or sent wirelessly from the animal's body to the scientist's computer, much like how Wi-Fi or Bluetooth technology works. So it's really putting a lot of engineering, physics, biology all together to achieve something this cool. Now, the scientist's computer may be like any other laptop or PC you see around you. But the devices that are attached to the animal's body that transmit all of this electrophysiology data or this positional information from the of the animal, all of these devices are very highly specialized. In this case, take a look at this illustration. In what we did is we created a very lightweight head cap and a sort of a backpack that contained all the required equipment, and it was glued to the seal's head and back. So it was completely non-invasive, which means that none of the equipment ever broke the skin surface of the animal, which may not be the case in all kinds of electrophysiology efforts. So this is one way it can be done. So basically, after showing you all of this, the bottom line is that despite so much variety in how animals sleep, some common features do emerge across the animal kingdom. But these features also coincide with other states of dormancy like hibernation. Several animals, once asleep, can transition into some other kinds of states of vigilance that are characterized by very different physiological signatures. And one such state, which is of special interest to many sleep scientists, is torpor. Now, torpor is like an umbrella term under which hibernating bears, ground squirrels, birds, freezing fish, frogs, insects, hummingbirds, all of them come in. Broadly speaking, it's basically a collection of energy conservation strategies. Now, while a torpid animal like the one you see here or here might, because of its posture, appear to be asleep, torpor is not the same as sleep. In fact, during torpor, animals are deprived of sleep and they have to periodically come out of this state of energy conservation to be able to catch up on lost sleep and also to forage a little bit, get some food, go to the toilet, and so on. Um, all the different energy conservation strategies that come under torpor have two common points. One is that there is a reduction in the amount of energy spent in a given period of time, that is, a reduction in metabolic rate, which in easy, if I were to use one word for this long sentence, I'd say hypometabolism. And the other feature, common feature, is a lower body temperature called hypothermia. Now, the most popular phenomenon under this umbrella term of torpor is hibernation or deep torpor, that is seasonal, really long duration, sometimes around 3 months. And there is a significant decrease of around 15 to 35 degrees Celsius in body temperature, as is seen in bears in the winter. Another kind is shallow daily torpor, where the depth and the duration of the hypothermia and the hypometabolism is not that long or not that deep. This is more commonly seen in smaller mammals like hamsters, dormice, and some birds. Now, if this sort of a shallow torpor is seen in response to hot and dry environments, as it is seen in some reptiles and amphibians, like this green striped burrowing frog in Australia, it is called estivation. What I work on is shallow daily torpor, and I'll talk about this a little bit more. Now, daily torpor, in my DPhil research lab, we particularly focus on two torpor expressing species, the good old lab mice and the other not so common but super cute Siberian dwarf hamsters that are native to the high altitude Siberian wheat fields, a washed out image of which you can see in the background. Now, in really harsh winter conditions, when it's cold and the exposure to daylight is reduced, much like what we're experiencing now, or when there is less food available and the animals are metabolically challenged, these species fall asleep. And at some point, when they are in non REM sleep, they transition into a state of torpor. But before I tell you about why I'm interested in studying sleep and torpor in Siberian hamsters, let me show you what a torpid animal can look like. Now, this is an example of a hedgehog. In the months of October and November, hedgehogs eat a lot to prepare to go into torpor in the winter months. They need to be around 500 to 700 grams of weight to be able to survive. It gets too cold for them to be able to support their body's mechanisms of heat production, and so they enter torpor to conserve energy in order to survive the harsh winter. Now they find some places like compost heaps or under garden sheds or decking, or they build what's known as hibernacula out of leaves and twigs to curl up in and stay protected from predators while in torpor. And during this time, their body temperature is around 5 to 10 degrees Celsius, and they can survive by even breathing just twice in a whole minute. So, what is happening in this video is that this gentleman has found a hamster in one of his hedges. Sorry, not a hamster, a hedgehog in one of his hedges. And when he tried to gently touch the hedgehog, it didn't wake up. But he knows that since it was in a location that's a little protected, it's most likely in torpor. And it's also a winter month that this video was shot in. So, what they're going to do so that the animal is safe is lightly pick it up without disturbing it and put it in a safer spot made of hay so that it's protected from rain and animals, and also it's in a protected enclosure so that the dogs don't come in. So if you see ever a cold and barely breathing hedgehog tucked away in some corner of your garden and it doesn't wake even upon lightly disturbing it, don't discard it thinking it's dead. It's probably in torpor. So the difference is that you'll seldom see a dead hedgehog so curled up. Another example of a common bird, hummingbirds are not found in the UK, but in the Americas. These animals, these birds go into torpor sometimes just hanging upside down. And this is also a home video from a couple who put out a bird feeder in their backyard, and they tell you a story here where they think that the animal is in deep sleep, but now you know that it's not in deep sleep, it's in torpor. So during torpor, their body temperature can low for hummingbirds, it can lower to around 3 degrees Celsius, and the heart rate, which is actually usually very high, it's around 1200 beats per minute for these birds. During torpor, it goes down to just 50 beats per minute. And sometimes people just think that the birds are dead, whereas they're actually just in torpor, and you just need to let them be there, and they wake up, eat a bit, and go away. So in the lab, how do we study sleep and torpor? We use two things, thermal imaging and electrophysiology. Electrophysiology is kind of similar to what I showed you or explained briefly in the seal example, but thermal imaging is new to this discussion. So as opposed to normal cameras like the ones on our phones that capture radiations in the visible range that we can see with our eyes, thermal imaging cameras are special because they capture radiations in the infrared range. Now, infrared radiations are a function of body heat, as you can see here. This is also a hummingbird that was you could see that it was breathing fast and it was really warm and orange and yellow earlier because it was awake, but now you see that the color of the hummingbird is very cold. It's like purplish and similar to its surroundings. That's because it was in torpor. So the hotter, warmer colors that are higher up on the scale bar are say that the animal is warm, and the colder, bluer colors say that the animal is not so warm. So it can tell you about change in body temperature. So, equipped with these two kinds of techniques, it was found in mice and hamsters that, given the right conditions, they fall asleep, and at one point in non REM sleep, they enter torpor, where they experience a drastic metabolic suppression that can go down to nearly 95% of their basal metabolic rate for anywhere between 30 minutes to 6 hours. And if you talk about what changes in EEG or brain activity do you see during torpor? So, like I said, the EEG waves during non REM sleep are fat and tall. The EEG waves during torpor are also fat, like those seen in non REM sleep, but they're not as tall. So, some people actually suggest that torpor is a period of sleep deprivation because when animals come out of torpor, their EEG waves are taller. And usually, if you sleep deprive any animal and you let them sleep after being really sleep deprived for a long time, you see taller EEG waves. So, taller than usual EEG waves is kind of like an indication of sleep rebound after deprivation. And so, upon emergence from torpor, similar kinds of waves are seen, and therefore it's thought to be a state of sleep deprivation. Now, looking more specifically at these hamsters, they are nocturnal and burrowing creatures, and in nature, they experience two seasons broadly. Summer, when they have nearly 18 hours of sunlight in a day, and the other is winter, like we are in now, where there is 18 hours of darkness instead. So we actually try to simulate these conditions in the lab as well. So if you move a hamster from the summer room to the winter room where it experiences more darkness than light for around 10 to 12 weeks in the winter room, it is enough to initiate entrance into torpor. So summer hamsters are actually brown in color and they don't show torpor. But winter hamsters, when they've spent around 10 to 12 weeks in the low sunlight or low light, short photo period room, they turn white, they lose a lot of weight, they become somewhat smaller, and then start going into torpor slowly. So there are so many different kinds of phenotypical or visible, observable, and trackable changes that happen in these animals when they start going into torpor that they become really important and very ideal uh, model organisms or organisms that you can study to understand the phenomenon of torpor better. So it's not just a change in the fur color from brown to white, but there is also the fact that in the winter condition, when they are white and they've lost weight, they cannot reproduce either. They start eating less on their own. There's a redistribution of where the fat is stored in their body. And all of this you can track scientifically over time. So, some really cool things are therefore happening during torpor in hamsters. I told you a few things, but a few others are when they are in torpor, along with a reduction in body temperature, the heart rate also goes down, and the blood that reaches the brain also goes down. The oxygen requirement is less as well, and overall, the immune responses are suppressed. But when an animal comes out of torpor, which is also quite an important and exciting time, the blood flow that had earlier reduced to the heart and the brain rapidly increases again to come back to normal. Now, this may not seem like a lot. Something that goes down will also increase. But if all of these increases and decreases in blood flow at these time scales that we are seeing in hamsters were to start to happen in humans, then that would be something you would find on a hospital sheet of what a condition that's known as cerebral ischemia. Now, cerebral ischemia is nothing but low blood flowing to the brain, and this is something that's usually caused by stroke or cardiac arrest or some sort of severe brain trauma, and it either leads to some really serious disability and often to death. Therefore, these are some really extraordinary abilities that torpor-prone animals can show that seem to also be highly conserved in evolution. Now, humans, at the beginning of this whole lecture or discussion, I had provided you the link of a video that spoke about can humans hibernate? Now, answering that somewhat, humans can sleep, and we've seen so far that sleep and torpor are very closely linked. So, understanding how they are linked may actually help humans go into torpor. But why do we want to consider human torpor? There are lots of reasons. Two main ones are you saw that animals can suffer or go through, rather, they do not suffer, they can endure the conditions of ischemia like things happening to their body very easily, and they don't seem to have any problems to either their memory or their day-to-day functioning. So understanding how this can happen in them and trying to replicate it in humans can be very important for treatment of neurocritical care for conditions like hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy, where reduction of blood flow to the brain is a key thing that leads to a lot of suffering and death, and cardiac arrest in general, where there is a imbalance in how the blood flow to the heart works. And the second, more fantastical and interesting, as I think, application of trying to create human torpor is long duration space flight. So, for example, the key challenge of trying to fly to from Earth to Mars is that the vessels that carry humans, the rockets and whatnot, have to be equipped with a lot of resources in terms of oxygen, water, food, basic amenities for a human to survive on it if they were to take it for such a long duration space flight. But if the human hibernates, if it goes into torpor, if it tries to conserve its energy and doesn't have so many requirements, the need to equip the vessel with so many resources goes down, and it creates an opportunity to think about those kinds of exploratory adventures. So I hope this is interesting. I'm going to end this talk with a picture of an Arctic ground squirrel, one of the most extreme torpedators, coming out of torpor. So it starts with a ground squirrel. They show you that the human hand is very hot, but the animal is really cold. It's near the blue-black range here. And this is a sped up video. All the torpor videos you saw so far were really like sped up in time. The time scales are, I forget the word for it, but yeah, it's 1.5x or 2x faster than what it actually was when it was recorded. So yeah, slowly you'll see that this animal may appear dead to the world. It's not moving, it's really cold. But with time, it's going to start breathing faster. It's going to start shivering slowly, and it comes out, gets warmer, and wakes up for the world. And once it wakes up, it also slowly goes to sleep after eating a little bit. So if some of you fell asleep, or couldn't have gone into torpor, but if you fell asleep, then this is the time to wake up. And we can leave these questions, leave this video playing for a bit so that you can see the whole process. And in the meantime, I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you for listening.
Brilliant, thank you, E.T. That was really interesting. If anyone has any questions, please do put them in the chat function, which should be at the top of your screen. There should be a little like a speech bubble sort of thing where you can type questions in there. While we wait for anyone to ask any questions they might have, I'll ask a question if that's all right. Do you have a favorite sort of fun fact that you've sort of uncovered throughout your research?
A favorite fun fact. Well, I mean, this could be a little silly, but one thing that I realized that the hamsters I work with really like is that they they first of all they play with you a lot if you play with them, but if you, for example, put your finger in front of them and keep doing it for a while, they actually learn to jump on it and then go under it. So it's like your finger becomes like a running wheel for them. So yeah, I've seen that in a few hamsters and it's really fun. Not sure if that's what you were expecting, but yeah, that's
No,
what
that's
comes to
that's
mind.
excellent. You know, it's all part of life in your field of research, isn't it? So it's fascinating to learn about. Um, no one's typed any questions yet. I'll see if anyone might be. Oh, we have a question. It's a great question from Hannah. How did you get into this field?
Great question indeed. So what I was saying about my undergrad being during the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, that's when sitting at home, I really didn't have a lot of stuff to do. So I started reading a lot of books. And one book that I read at that time, while I say that, just note that the animal's rewarming. So you see that the orange color is spreading from the head towards the back. So that's something that happens, and that's how they wake up slowly. But yeah, while I was at home and I was reading books, one book I read it was called Why We Sleep, and I highly recommend it. So it talks about a lot of things that I discussed here, and that's where I read about unihemispheric sleep, and I found the phenomenon so fascinating that I tried to find people who were working on it, and slowly I wrote to them. Like, I just sent random emails saying that, hi, I'm a kid interested in the kind of stuff you do, and some of them were most of them were really kind, responded, and then I managed to get an internship with the seal sleep researchers I was telling you about, where the seals go into long apneas. And yeah, that's how I got into the field. Then I stayed, got an opportunity to come to Oxford. And all of this has been in the last few years. So this started in 2020. Since then, I've been working on sleep. I hope to continue working on sleep in different species.
That's brilliant. Thank you for answering that. Can you see these questions now? I know you've stopped presenting,
Yep,
so maybe if
I
you want to work
can.
your way through them and answer people's questions, that'd be amazing.
Yep, sure. Um, Rohan asks, what was required to study zoology at university, and can you take a PhD in zoology? So, for me to study zoology at the undergrad level in India, all that was required for me was having studied biology in my high school and chemistry. So I did those two things and I applied and got a position because my marks were high enough. So the system works probably a little different in India than it does here. But we had at my time percentages in the central school exam. And if your percentage in overall percentage similar to your overall GPA is above a certain cutoff limit, then you get to join the university to study that degree. And you can certainly do a PhD in zoology after getting a bachelor's. In the UK, I know that you can do that. And you probably have to have a bachelor's with honors for it. So the best way to find out would be the different web pages of the different universities offering PhDs or DPhils in zoology. But yeah, if you've studied enough biology as a prerequisite, it should be an easy path. Grace asks, what have your studies taught you about human sleep or your own sleep routine? So there's a lot about human sleep really, because a lot of this research has some sort of input into understanding human sleep better. Um, the answer to this question can be really long, but to take the second part of your question to answer it, my own sleep routine is that, first of all, I try my best to sleep 8 hours. Um, it sounds sometimes impossible to do, but you really should. And the second thing is, it's very important to get enough sunlight in the day. So, for example, as sleep scientists, we work in places that are often not very well lit, because if you want to create dark conditions in the lab, you have to work in the dark for a very long time. And if you want to create light conditions, there's a lot of artificial light. So that's not always optimal for your health, for your own well being and circadian rhythms or bodily clocks. So, get as much sunlight as you can. And I have been trying to do that. So, for example, if you're staying indoors all the time, then try to take breaks every hour or so to go out and get enough sunlight, and um, align your body clocks to how it should be with the external world. And at night, in the evenings, I try to really reduce my screen time, because how much light enters your eyes affects how well you sleep at night. So when you're not supposed to have be exposed to too much light, try not to have a lot of light around you. So reduce your screen time post 7 p.m. I learned that, and I would like to recommend that to you. Um, how long do the aquatic animals sleep for? How long are they awake? And does this match day and night for all animals? That's a really good question, Hannah. So there is a difference in how long each aquatic animal sleep, but the recent paper or the research we published in the northern elephant seals that sleep with both their hemispheres and have hold their breaths, they sleep very little in at sea. It's almost like just 2 hours in a whole day, and the rest of the time they keep swimming and foraging and eating. So the rest of the time they're awake. And this does not match day and night for all animals. There's a lot of variation in terms of body size, brain size, and how long each animal sleeps. So there have been a lot of analysis on maybe if an animal is small, it doesn't need to sleep that much. But that doesn't seem to be the case. If an animal is big, it probably needs to sleep more, but that doesn't seem to be the case either. So the question of why different animals sleep for different durations is still open. And if you're interested, it could be something that you discover. um, do you get the opportunity to work with many different species on a daily basis, or is it mainly hamsters? On a daily basis, I work mostly with hamsters and sometimes mice. But for my master's project, I worked with ferrets, so that was for 3 months. And before that, I worked remotely online with the seals. Before this, actually also worked with fruit flies, also on a project. Like they're these tiny black things that fly around your bananas, and they have red eyes. They're great to work with too. So yeah, no, not on a daily basis, but different projects. I try to work with other different species because every animal is so fascinating. Was Oxford always your aim, or was it an opportunity that was presented to you? So this was actually a very uh, an accidental thing for me, because while I was working on the Seal Sleep project, I had to do what is called a literature review. So you have to basically look into the history of your field's research and see what has been done. While I was doing that, I found my current supervisor, or the person under whom I work or do my PhD, and they had also had similar education in zoology and was interested in torpor and in sleep. And that is something very difficult to find. Very few labs around the world do this. So Oxford was certainly one of my aims. There were a few others, but Oxford was always on the top of my list. Um, yeah. How do you think climate change or global warming will affect animal sleep or hibernation, if that's plausible? It is certainly plausible. There are actually so many papers right now looking at this, because as the climates get warmer in general, as the temperature increases year by year, um, the habitats in which these animals rest, sleep, or hibernate get destroyed. And if it gets destroyed, it means that it's a very big conservation problem. So let me give you two examples in this case. First is in the seal example. So northern elephant seals almost went extinct in California many years ago because they were hunted so much. And then, apart from hunting, slowly, as things changed, as sailors were not that common and hunting and poaching was looked down upon, it was discovered in some part of Mexico that there was still a small colony that survived somehow. And the University of California in Santa Cruz, they took the responsibility to revive the elephant seal population by bringing this colony in and taking care of them. That is when they realized that over the years, the environment and the climate had changed so much that it was more than just a hunting problem. They had to preserve the habitats so that the animals could, when they were sleeping in the ocean, sleep well. The nutrients available in the oceans had to be enough for them to eat so that they could have the required energy to survive when they were awake and sleep in the regions that they traditionally did in. So that's one example. Another example is the fact that there is now a lot of research on colonies of animals having to migrate towards the northern hemisphere. Animals that are used to colder climates. They have to move higher altitudes to in order to survive, and that brings in things like competition, because animals are changing habitats, populations are shifting, and there are new challenges, new problems, new nutrients that they earlier weren't exposed to, or new predators that they earlier weren't exposed to. So that's really changing what ecosystems look like today, and is sometimes, in some cases, leading to endangering or extinction of species. So it's certainly super plausible and also not researched enough, but warrants a lot of effort and research from the community. Alex asks, do animals wake up partway through torpor and then go back into torpor to get food? Yep. So to get food and to catch up on lost sleep, they wake up partway through torpor, and then they go back to sleep again, and through sleep they enter torpor. That definitely happens, but when they do that differs. So the deep torpedators or the hibernators like bears, they do this after many months of being in torpor. So if you ever see a video of a bear coming out of hibernation, it'll look like really, sometimes it looks really emaciated. It, because it hasn't moved for months, its muscles waste away a little bit, and so you can see that it's really slow and it looks like it's been napping forever. But that happens. But sometimes in the animals I work with, like hamsters, they periodically, like every few hours or so, they come out of torpor. They move around a little, eat something if they want, and then sleep a little. And at some point in sleep, they go into torpor again. What processes occur to make us fall asleep or feel sleepy? There I can give you a whole presentation for this, but there are many things that could lead to it. So this could be sort of like a homework for you. I'll tell you what to look for, and then you can look for it. It's a very simple model for thinking about the processes that occur to make us fall asleep. It's called the two process model of sleep. I'm going to put it in the chat box so that anyone who's interested can look it up. Two process model of sleep. Yep. And so what this model does, I'll just explain it briefly, is that it talks about all the different things. So why would you do something? For example, if I have a cabinet and there are a lot of files in it, and I just have that one cabinet where I can store things. So I keep putting files in, I keep putting files in it, and at one point that cabinet gets so full that I can never put another file in it. So at some point I actually need to stop. I need to go through all my files, figure out which ones I really need, which ones I don't need, and which ones are, I basically need to categorize them. I need to prioritize which ones to keep and which to throw away, burn, incinerate. So that is one thing that happens in sleep. That's one process that leads to and drives sleep as well in the context of memories. So sometimes you have so much that you look at during the day that the file storage in your brain probably cannot hold so much. This is a very like loose example, but contextually, this happens. And then during sleep, your brain goes through all the things that you've seen throughout the day, decides which to keep, which to reinforce. If you're seeing something that you've seen previously, it makes those memories stronger. And if you're seeing something that doesn't really seem that important, it slowly gets rid of them. So it's like a cleanup process. So memory is one process that could lead to sleep, make you fall asleep. Then there is the thing about your body clock or circadian regulation of sleep, which is a big driver of sleep. Then there are things like immunological processes. There are a lot of restorative functions. So there are different sorts of cells in your immune system, natural killer cells, T cells. All of these work differently when you're asleep, and these are all essential functions. Now, we know these things because we've studied them in some animals, but we do not know the relative importance of these processes in different animals, because it seems that some animals can sleep for just 2 hours and still be fine, and some animals need 20 hours to do the same processes. So how important the processes that lead to sleep are universally is still a question. And that is why we are still asking the question of why we sleep. Yeah. I don't think we have more questions, but I hope I was able to answer your questions somewhat, and that you're interested in reading up a little bit more after this.
Yeah, I mean, that was fascinating. I found that really interesting. Thank you so much, Ritika. Yeah, thank you all for attending. I hope you've all found it as interesting as I have. I mean, there's been loads and loads of questions, so that's clearly people have really enjoyed it. Just a quick reminder, we are running a few, like lots more of these insight talks, but two particular talks you might find interesting if you found this one interesting, is we're running a talk on marine ecology on the 16th of January and one on animal mimicry on the 22nd of January. So you may have already signed up for those already, but if not, please sign up for those if you're interested in coming along to those. That is fantastic. I think we'll end everything there. Thank you so much again, Ritika. Have a lovely evening, everybody, and thank you for coming.
Bye bye. Thank you. Thank you for having me, Jack. Bye bye.